Hello? What's up? Oh, okay, sorry. I don't know what else to say. You hear some drunk bitch yelling and you just assume it's McCabe. Okay, so I have like a very amateur question. I keep looking at you,
Yes.
at your eyeballs, but you want me to look there. Or do you want me to look at you?
I want you to look into the camera as much as possible, but I'm right behind it, so
I know, but
into the camera as much as possible.
try.
Yeah.
I am more camera shy than I think I am. Like I did a photo shoot. Remember when I did that photo shoot at work?
Mm-hmm.
And I was so I couldn't do anything. I just kept like looking at the floor and like kind of like going like I don't know what to do, and I was like I was doing weird things that like you shouldn't do when you're trying to take a good photo.
Why do you think you're camera shy?
I have no idea. I don't know. I think that's part of the reason I like live theater, because like I don't have the pressure of like a lens staring at me. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm more like about relating like human to human. I can't relate like human to machine.
Are we good sound-wise? We're good to start? Yeah. Okay. All right, Nikki.
Hi.
Tell me your name, your age, and where you're from.
My name is Nikki, and I was going to say my name is Nikki and I'm an alcoholic, which is true. I'm 34. I'm from San Diego.
Who is Nikki McCabe?
Who is Nikki McCabe? I think for a long time I thought Nikki McCabe was this awesome party girl who could, you know, like, who was getting away with, you know, all this and all that and partying and just making everybody happy and everything, but I wasn't, but I didn't know that. My whole life, I wanted to be, I wanted everybody to know I was good. I was okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Even though there's a shitstorm going on underneath, I am a part of this universe, a very small part of it. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I'm a lonely girl sometimes, but I'm also very loved. Nikki McCabe is a lot of things. Gosh. Growing up in San Diego was growing up outside. I was always barefoot. I was always climbing trees. If you go back to that complex, there's my name carved into almost every tree possible. I never wanted to be from San Diego until I moved away from San Diego. And then that was home. And then I always wanted to be home. It never changes. You know your hometown never changes. When life changes all around me, which it has so much, I always know I can go back home and it's going to be the same Denny's, the same Jack in the Box, the same soup plantation right by my mom's house. The beach, the smell of the ocean. So it's comforting. Living in San Diego, being from San Diego. I fucked that up. My mom is known as mommy to everybody in my life. She just has this amazing, like, healing, nurturing mom energy. Butterflies land on her. Like, squirrels come up to her. She's very much so a nuclear family member, you know? She grew up in that everything looks good on the outside. You don't say what really is going on inside. As long as everything looks good, you're good. Letting people know that you're not fine is a very vulnerable space to be in. When you're partying and you're drinking and doing drugs, you don't want people to know it's because you're not fine. Although that's what it's screaming. I'm learning that I'm also very nurturing and that I'm also very much so a caregiver, which is not a character personality trait that I would, you know, if you were to ask me like, what are your 3 character traits? I wouldn't be like, I'm a nurturer. But apparently in my actions show that I am.
What are your 3?
I knew you were going to do that. I'm bubbly. I'm loyal. And Raw? That's a good one. Rare.
Tell me about your dad.
I don't know my dad. All I really know is that she had me. Apparently he was at the hospital and then not around. I never felt like my dad was missing. I mean, I'm not dumb. I knew that like other kids had dads and I didn't, you know? But I always was very adaptable. Whoever was my best friend at the time, their dad would be my dad. On Father's Day in school, when you would make stuff for your family, I would make stuff for my grandpa until he died. And then I would just make it for my mom. You know, I was like, fuck it. I still give her presents on Father's Day. I still text her and call her on Father's Day. When I was 22, I want to say, I was in Jersey for some reason. I was staying in Jersey. God knows why. And my mom called me and she goes, so your dad called? And I was like, excuse me? And he wanted my phone number out of the blue. And she was like, I'll have to ask her about that. And he told her a little bit about himself to try to coax her to give him my number. I don't know. Turns out he has 5 other kids with 4 other women. And one of them was actually before me. Because I always assumed that, he knocked some chick up too young and he ran away. Turns out he had a daughter, stayed in her life, found out my mom was knocked up, left me, then continued to have children and is in all of their lives but mine. And when I found this out when I was 22-ish, I said, no, Mom, no, don't give him my number.
Why do you think he reached out when he did?
That's something that I never cared about until recently. There's a very real possibility he was in some sort of recovery program and trying to make an amends, and I just shat all over it. There may be some meeting dad to do in the future. I don't know. It's something that I'm not entirely sure would be the worst thing, but at the same time, I don't know if it would do any good. I don't know. I'm terrified to find out that all along I've been the asshole. Because when it comes down to it, that's probably it. What's up? I'm in the middle of shooting a fucking movie. Bye. What was I talking about?
When did you first fall in love with dance?
Dance. I think I was 4, 5-ish. We went to go see this dance show, and when we were done with it, my mom was like, did you like it? And I was just like, I was amazed. And she was like, do you want to do that? And I was like, everything about it, everything about the theater, the way the theater smelled, the way the theater got dark, the way the seats felt, the way the lights were on the stage, the way you could see like the dust, like when the dancers did something and you could see the dust in the lights. It was magic. It was just magic. And I wanted to make magic. We found the closest rec to my house and I signed up for dance that day. I love tap dance. It's the only form of dance where I really feel like I'm really in it with my whole body and I can lose my head. You know, when I'm doing ballet or something, I'm thinking like, oh shit, okay, tap, beat, right. When I'm doing ballroom, I was always thinking like posture and la la la. When I'm doing tap, I don't think about anything but the rhythm, anything but the beat. That's it. You can lose yourself in it. I can lose myself in tap dance. It can be very chaotic on the outside, but inside it just feels kind of calm. Like everything's aligned. And when I was a freshman in high school, my mom took me to New York City as my Christmas/birthday present. And we went for spring break and we stayed at a hostel in Times Square. We came up out of the ground, like right there on 34th Street. And I just remember looking up and being like, holy fuck, this is where I want to live. The hustle and bustle. And this sounds so cliche too when I say this shit, you know? Oh, the city it was so rustling and bustling, you know? Everybody with their briefcases going to work, eh? But that's how it felt. That's how it felt. AMDA was very much so what I expected and very much so not what I expected. I remember being in my first dance class. It may have been placements where they placed us in whatever level of dance we were going to be in. And looking around the room, and we were all wearing leotards and tights, and looking around the room which was very white, and looking outside and seeing the buildings and thinking like, holy fuck, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm doing it. And then turning around and being back in the class and being like, but I'm like, am I? Like, I didn't feel like I was actually participating in the class. I feel like a lot of my life has been like that. Like, I feel like I'm there, but I'm not in it. It's like I'm almost watching it happen. And I'm not actually happening. My group, which was like, we were like the derelicts. We were like the derelicts of AMDA. Like, we were the ones that were always getting locked out for being late. We had people that were always showing up hungover, people that didn't finish. But it was weird because it was like the very talented group that just had to get their shit together. Mumsy. The little old Spanish, I believe, woman who stood outside the Strat, which was the dorm. And she stood out there with her no teeth, her little gums, and her Keds shoes, her white Keds. Well, they used to be white, brown Keds, with her crew socks and this printed skirt with her t-shirt with was it a flower?
Mm-hmm.
Tucked into the skirt, and her cane, and she would just sit outside of the Strat. And then musical theater kids would try to come in the door, and she would hit them with her cane. And so literally we would have to stand and like wait, and then like wait, she'd hit someone, and go! And then we'd have to go. And it was so much fun. It was like a game getting in without Mumsy hitting you. She lived right above me, and I would hear her move all her furniture into front of the dorm. In front of the door every night. And she asked me to take her to her room one night to go to sleep. And I took her to her room, and it was very empty. And the lady that worked at the Strat later told me that she was a ballerina, and that she had the same birthday as me, December 26th. And that she asked for me to take her to her bed a lot. So I did it a few times. I didn't take her every night or anything, but I don't know what happened to Mumsy. I don't know where her family went. I don't know what happened. If she was a ballerina that was trying to make it in New York, who knows? Maybe she fell off the right track. Maybe there's so much speculation. Maybe her husband died and she went crazy and he left her no money and she ended up being a hooker. And then she went crazy and ended up in the Stratford Arms, doomed to a life and death with musical theater students.
How did you try to make your dreams come true?
I did not try to make my dreams come true. I graduated from AMDA, and I became a full-time server at Planet Hollywood. And it's really, really hard to audition for things in New York City when you're still at the bar at 4 a.m, and you have to be at the audition at 6. I think I went to one open call, and it was an open call for equity only, and I just showed up. Yeah. And I just showed up hoping that they would, because sometimes they would see you, and they didn't have time to see me. And then everybody that we went to AMDA with went to this other audition for, I think it was Cats?
I think so. Mindy and...
Yeah, and it was like down in South Carolina or something like that. And they all got it, and they were all in it. And I was such a smug little New York bitch. I was like, I don't want to audition for things outside of New York. And so I didn't audition for any of the tours. I remember very clearly the West Side Story Asian tour that I was like, I bet you I could get that. But I didn't want to leave New York. I think I was terrified of auditioning and not getting it. And feeling like an idiot. And making a fool of myself. And I was also terrified of getting it. And leaving New York. And leaving my boyfriend. And leaving my cat. And I still do that to this day. I still will be like, oh, an audition for a cruise ship. But what am I going to do about Lucy, my dog? What am I going to do about my house? You know, I so far future trip for auditions that I talk myself out of even printing my resume for it. All the time. I just always thought that auditions had to be like, they're looking for this exact thing, and if I'm not perfect for it, then I'm a fucking idiot for even showing up. I always kind of felt like everybody knew how to do it, right? Everybody kind of got the memo on how to audition and how to get cast, and that's not the case. Everyone's out there just trying their best, I believe.
I'm gonna move over here. You still good in the chair? You're free to move if you want.
Me?
Yeah, you. Yeah, you can get up and move if you want to, but you're fine where you are.
Yeah, I'm good. 4 days before my 15th birthday, I want to say. Maybe, I don't know. I was hanging out with all my friends, which all my friends were seniors when I was a freshman. And we were walking around Hillcrest, San Diego. We were approached by a man wearing a leather jacket, and he opened it up, and there was a bottle of Jack Daniels, and it was sealed. And he said, hey kids, I'm going to a party, or I was going to a party, but I'm not going anymore. Would you like this? $20. And we were like, nobody had any money on them, except I had $20 on me because I was going to buy my mother's Christmas present with it. And so I said, yeah, sure. So I bought it. And then we were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? So we drove to the Bay. And, well, we did what I pretty much did for the next 20 years of my life, which was get drunk at the beach and sing musical theater songs at the top of my lungs. I took the first pull from it. They opened it and they gave it to me. And I just, down the hatch. I loved the way it felt. I loved the way it burned. I love the way it burned. I love the way it burned and it sat right here. And then I love the way it felt in my thighs. I love the way it felt going down my arms. I threw up a ton. I pointed at my throw up. I said, what's that? And they were like, that's your throw up. And I was like, no, that's chunks. Chunks. And I started laughing hysterically at the chunks of throw up on the floor. And my nickname for the rest of high school was Chunks. They took me to Denny's because they didn't know what to do with me because I was just vomiting everywhere. We had this waitress at Denny's. Her name was Sandy. God bless Sandy. She was like our mom, our Denny's mom. And she would be like, okay, you guys, if you're going to sit here all night and do your lines, because that's what we did. That's what you do when you're at Denny's. You like order coffee and stay there and do lines with your drama nerd friends. She was like, I'm going to have to ask you to order a little bit more, you know. So she was like there trying to help me, trying to figure it out.
Do you mean running lines or doing coke at the Denny's?
No, running lines.
Okay.
Not doing lines. Was I saying doing lines?
You just, yes.
Fuck. I mean, I was doing lines in high school, but not at Denny's, not just openly. My mom was not at home when I got home, but I didn't have my key. And so I had to break into my room, which was way easier than it should have been. I had to figure out how to do laundry because I'd never done laundry before being a freshman in high school. And I had puke all over my clothes. And then I think it was golden. I don't think my mom noticed or anything like that. And I didn't drink I mean, it's hard to drink when you're in high school. I don't think I drank again for like another couple months. But my first drink was a doozy. I drank. I right away wanted more. I right away blacked out. I right away threw up. Turns out not everybody does that when they drink.
Did your mom drink?
My mom still drinks. My mom does drink. My mom drank as a child when I was a child. I don't know if she drank as a child. One of my earliest memories with my mom, and one of my favorite memories actually, is we would stay up. She would let me stay up late with her to watch the top 10 list on David Letterman. And the way that we would stay up so late is that we would play cards. And we would sit on the floor of our apartment, and I would have a phone book because my hands were too little to hold the cards. And she would drink White Zinfandel out of the Franzia box. And she had this mug, plastic mug from SeaWorld. It was about yay high, about that big around, with a handle, and it was like frosted white because it was from the penguin enclosure. It had penguins all around it. And that's what she would drink her Franzia wine out of. And every time she got low, I would jump up and go fill it up for her. And every time I filled it up, I would just take a little taste.
Did she know?
Probably. I don't know. She never told me not to. One of her things she would do is on like a weekend, on like a Saturday, she wouldn't get out of bed till like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would get up, and I learned how to climb on all the counters to make breakfast. She would wake up and be like, Nikki! I still can hear it. I can still hear it. And I would be like, yeah! And she'd go, just checking! And then she'd roll over and go back to bed. And I remember sometimes I would, like, at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I would, like, be like, Mom? And she'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, are you getting up? And she'd be like, I just have really bad cramps. She had really bad cramps all the time. It's funny now, as an adult, realizing she was just fucking hungover. A low-level panic is what it always feels like when you don't have a drink and you need to get one. There's a desperation that comes with alcoholism that is not a joke. For me, I needed to be drinking always. I always needed to know where my next drink was coming from as I was enjoying the current drink. So if I'm at a restaurant, let's say, and I have half a pint of beer left, I'm already looking. I'm like this, I'm starting to get twitchy, and I'm starting to be like, where is that waitress? Doesn't she know? Doesn't she see where my beer is at? This is serious business. You know, I'm starting to get there. Once I have, let's say that she sees that and I order another beer and it sits down next to it and I have a full beer here and a half beer here, then I can, okay, I'm good. You know? I need to always be ahead of the game. I was not a girl that ran out of drugs. I was not a girl that ran out of drinks. I had a 30-pack in the fridge, and once I had about six left, was pushing it. I already had another 30-pack. The more I drank, the more it was like waking up in my bed, and the last thing I remember was being at the bar and being like, what did I do last night? Rather than like, what did I do last night? And then it progressed into waking up and being like, who the fuck is that? And what did I do last night? And, and then you get to a point where you don't even want to know what you did last night. I did drugs to manage my alcoholism.
What does that mean?
I could drink more if I was on drugs. I'm 110 pounds, and I drink a 30-pack of beer a day and about this much vodka. That's pretty much impossible unless you have some sort of a stimulant in you to keep you from passing out and to keep your motor skills functioning, to keep you from falling over. I was also an active ballroom dance teacher as I did all of this. The things that our bodies can do are fucking amazing. I wouldn't eat for weeks at a time. When you're smoking meth, you don't get hungry. You just don't. Every once in a while, you realize you need to eat, and what I would eat was either a string cheese, maybe a carton of yogurt, maybe soft things. You wanted to eat soft things because your teeth. When I would sleep every couple of days, I would wake up and I would be like, kind of sober and kind of hungry, and I would eat usually like a thing of ramen and start drinking again. I never shut up. Shooting up is one thing that I kind of knew if I did, I would be done for. I just kind of knew. Like, if I ever got to that level, I would be gone. And I don't necessarily mean dead. I just mean gone. Like, I would never come back. Nikki McCabe would never come back. I'd be in the tunnels, on the streets, in the motels, in the budget suites. And I would just never come back from that. I started out with diet pills, Metabolife in high school, cocaine, ecstasy, lots of ecstasy, back to cocaine, Adderall. I like uppers. So I never did pills. I never did oxys. I never did Vicodin. Never wanted any of that crap. I also never did acid or heroin or crack. Yay! I did mushrooms a few times and it scared the shit out of me. I thought that everything was water and I thought I was gonna drown. So I was like this on the couch all night telling people that they were drowning. I also ended up in the bathroom at that party for hours and I was doing this when they opened the door and they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Filing my papers. What are you doing?" Months later, I got a phone call from a random number and they were like, "Nikki?" And I'm like, "Yeah, who is this?" And they're like, "I'm blah, 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 blah's friend. You were at our house a couple months ago. I found your wallet." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. Where was it?" And they're like, "It was in a Darth Vader helmet in the back of our closet." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, thanks." Filing my papers, I guess I filed them. I don't know. Drinking for me was a solution to life. I think the best way I can put it is when I have a drink, I finally feel like I can breathe, but I didn't even know I was holding my breath. So drinking for me was it became the only way I knew how to deal with life. It gives me ease and comfort. It's not like every time I drink it was a party. I needed a couple drinks just to get out of bed, just to get normal, if that makes sense, just to get level.
Why do you think you needed something else to survive instead of just yourself?
My alcoholism tells me I'm not enough. Always. My whole life, I've always thought I was not enough. In every way, you know. When I drank, I was enough. Everything was okay.
What made you think that you wasn't enough? What caused that?
That not knowing, I can't even answer that. I don't even know what the answer is to that. I think that's just alcoholism. There's this evil bitch in my head that tells me I'm not enough, and she's always been there. I very strongly believe that alcoholism is something that you can either drink your way into, which some people do, or that you're born with. And I believe that I was born with it. And a lot of my actions as a child can reflect that. Tantrums that I would have as a kid, acting out rebelliously, show that I'm trying to be more. I just don't feel like I'm enough. And I'm trying to somehow prove it externally with some sort of action or behavior. And once I started drinking, everything was fine. Everything was level playing field. You know, some girls say that it makes them feel tittier, prettier, and wittier. And for me, it just made me feel on your level. I feel like everybody else in the world got an instruction manual to life, and I didn't get one. And when I drank, I felt like I had that manual.
But it sounds like alcoholism is an effect of, it's a way to cope with something else. And you're saying that it's the cause itself?
It's a very tricky disease, alcoholism. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Mm-hmm. For me as an alcoholic, as soon as I drink, I feel good. And I feel level and I feel good. And when I don't drink, I feel squirmy and kind of twitchy and like this undercurrent is going until I can drink again and then I feel good.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
You said in the beginning, you're talking about your father. Like you see, you don't know your father. And even though we have other people that may take a role as their father,
right?
You know, or some responsibilities, but the identity won't ever be that strong.
Right.
And that is something that do you think could be missing in your life that you're not wanting to understand or know, or because you said something like, I don't feel like when I was drinking, I didn't feel like I was enough. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like because of his lack of being there and being there for someone else that you didn't deserve his love?
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that question. I feel like sometimes I'm almost aggressively like it's not my dad. You know, like I'm like almost like very much so like it has nothing to do with the dad thing. Like it's not, because I really don't feel like that is something that has. I know that biologically speaking, my alcoholism comes from my mother's side, and if it comes from my father's side, great. Then I just got more alcoholism in my family. That's not something that I'm like really. You're right. It's a void, but I don't even know if the void is the right word, because the void means you need to fill it. I'm not really concerned about the why I'm an alcoholic, you know, but I know I am one, which is great, because a lot of people die not knowing that they're an alcoholic and they're just trying to, you know, feel better. Yeah. No, I like it. I like the question. It's actually something that's been brought up. There's so many people in recovery that didn't grow up with their dads, or their dad was in and out of their lives, or, you know, just absent fathers. And a lot of people, I almost said something kind of offensive, but I was going to say, I feel like a lot of people play that card. It's real easy to be like, I'm a drunk because I had an absent father, or I'm a drunk because I had an abortion, or I'm a drunk because, you know, I hoed myself out for blah, blah, blah. But whatever. You're drunk because you're drunk, or it's a real easy card to play in order to not grow up. I mean, and yeah, you know, I'm not going to lie. Like, there's a part of me that, like, my entire life has thought like that tortured artist, you know, like grungy, damaged girl is cool. It's just cool. And I've probably built a lot of my life to be that. You know, like, yeah, sure, like drinking and, you know, drug use can run in the family, and there's genetics and la la la, and I would have done it anyway. But I mean, let's be honest, it's cool. It's always cool to be a little crazy, right? When I hear someone bring up like, oh, I have an eating disorder, I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. You know, like, oh yeah, I know that. That's my life, you know? But I forget that it's not everybody's life. I forget that, like, you know, when I'm saying this, what I'm saying right now, all this stuff, you know, you're learning something. And like, to me, it's just like, this is just me. Like, I'm sick of me. Let's talk about something else. You know what I mean?
Hot damn. Okay.
This is so awkward.
Well, get comfortable.
I never wanted to strip because I was always scared I would run into my friends' dads. But when I moved to Vegas, I was like way gung-ho on the webcamming board. I was like, yeah, let's webcam. Me and my roommate at the time. I was like, it's easy. We don't have to leave the house. Like, we barely have to put enough makeup on. I thought it would be way easier. And she wanted to strip. Somehow she talked me into stripping. I was like, I'll strip if you webcam or something like that. I don't know. So we had a friend. I had a friend who was a hairstylist. And he knew the guy that ran Cheetahs. And he shot me his number. And I just texted him and was like, hey, can me and my friend come in tonight and talk to you? He's like, sure. So we just went in one night, sat at the bar, talked to him. He gave us the rundown, told us the time to come in the next day. And he was like, yeah, you guys are good. I was so fucked up every single time I stripped. And not because I didn't was ashamed or anything like that. It was just, that's the point of my addiction and alcoholism. That was like the last couple of years. So it's just, I was just always fucked up. All I really wanted was somebody to buy me a drink. Like, I didn't even give a shit about like lap dances or VIP rooms. The one time I went into a VIP room, I went with another girl because she was like, we can double up, we'll make more money. And I was like, okay. And then we got into the VIP room where there was a bottle and I just blacked out. Like, I don't even remember what we did in there. Like, I have no idea what happened in that VIP room. I just remember security being like, you got to get up, you got to go.
Does that frighten you that you were in an environment that potentially could have been dangerous and don't remember?
Oh, yeah. But that is like a much, much safer place to be, a VIP room of a strip club, than many of the other places that I blacked in at, like driving on the freeway. I've never made like amazing money. When I worked at Planet Hollywood, I made good money. But I was partying it away a lot of the times. I always fear not having enough money. But at the same time, I always feel like once I get more money, I'll be good. You know, once I have this much amount of money, then I'll be happier. Once I have this much shoes, I'll be happier. Once I have this job, I'll be better. You know what I mean? It's always something. It's always an external. It's always an external solution to an internal problem. You know.
What internally makes you happy?
Love.
What is love for you?
What is love for me? I mean, there's so much in my life that has been like, and who knows, maybe this goes back to Dad too, but like fear of abandonment is like a huge fear of mine. When I was a little girl, my mom had this friend and they would go out to the movies or whatever. And she would leave me with a babysitter and she would be like, I'll be home at 9. And if it was 9:01 and she wasn't home, I would be on the floor by the door, crying hysterically, sobbing, screaming, she's dead, she's never coming back, she's dead, freaking out, running outside, looking down the street, looking at the parking lot, losing my mind. And then my mom would come home at like 9:11, or that was a weird number, but like my mom would come home at like, 9:07 or something like that and be like, what is wrong with you? And I'd be like, you said you'd be home at 9. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that fear came from, but it was always there. So I guess love is the opposite of that. Like, safe.
How many times do you think you felt that?
Which one?
The safety.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Do you ever think about motherhood?
No.
Not even now?
No. I'm not built for kids. Like, in any way. Like, does not sound fun. I got pregnant. And I don't want kids. And I never wanted kids. And so we got rid of it. It's not a big deal to me. Like, I got pregnant. I didn't want to be pregnant. I got unpregnant. I do have maternal instincts. I know this because I've taught children, and I'm good with kids. But I am good with kids for about 45 minutes. It's the length of a dance lesson. I got a job at a bar, at a dive bar. The interview, the lady was like, do you drink? She was from Long Island. And I was like, yes, but never at work. She goes, you do now. And she pours me a shot. And I was like, oh, this is the best job ever. And it was amazing. It was bartending from 7 to 4 a.m. And the first night of my job, I'm so good at this. First night of my job, I banged my bar back. Oh yeah, we worked, we left the place together, I don't even know where we banged it out, somewhere in public in New York City. This fucking junkie. I don't know what was wrong with me, why I was attracted to him, why I desperately needed him, why I brought him home and never let him leave. He was a total pillhead, I didn't even see it. Like, he was dick. He and I got a huge fight. He fucking punched me in the face. So to get away from him, my friend in Canada, one of my girlfriends, was like, you seem like you need to get away. Why don't you come to Canada with me? I'll buy your ticket. Come to Canada. She greeted me at the door with a plate of cocaine and a beer. And she was like, welcome. And I was like, yay. So I did cocaine all night. And then we went to her boyfriend's house and we did cocaine all night again. I hadn't slept for 4 days and I was on tons of coke. The People's Court was on. And I was like, she was here. I was talking to her. And she's like, who? And I'm like, the judge. Once again, I'm hallucinating. I knew they weren't real, but they sounded so real. And I was so worried I was never going to come back. I'm insane and I'm losing my mind and I can't feel my teeth and I think they're falling out of my head. And my friend, I look at her and she's sitting on her couch like this. And she's like, and I'm making her cry. And like, this is a woman that went on tour with Motley Crue as a groupie and I'm making her cry. And then apparently what I did is I stood up and I screamed bloody murder and I threw my hands in the air and I screamed and I collapsed and I fell and I seized. So rewind. About 6 months prior to this, I was in the hospital for breaking my finger off when I was drunk. And it got infected in the bone and I had to live in the hospital on the orthopedic floor for 2 months while they did round-the-clock transfusions into me and antibiotics so I didn't die. So, living in the hospital was very fresh to me. So when I wake up in this hospital in Canada, I think that I'm in my old hospital room in San Diego. And so I wake up and they come in and they're like, do you know who you are? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, do you know where you are? And I was like, yeah. They're like, where are you? And I'm like, San Diego. And they're like, and I'm like, what? And they're like, what's the date? And I said some weird date, like February 12th, 1994. They left the room. And so I texted my mom and I was like, are you coming today? Because like my mom used to come visit me in the hospital every day when I had my fucked up finger. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like texting my mom and I'm making no sense. And I'm saying stuff like, can I have a carne asada burrito? She knows I went to Canada. So she's freaking out while I'm in this psych ward of the hospital that I woke up in Canada. Being crazy has always been a big fear of mine. And I've been jumping in and out of that pool of craziness a lot. And eventually I slept for a little bit and I woke up and I didn't hear anything and it was so nice. It was so nice. So nice. And then I took a cab from the New York airport to my apartment in Harlem and I get there and I open the door. And my mom is standing there in my apartment. And my 2 cats are already in the cat carriers. And all of my shit is in luggage. And my mom's like, we're going home. I went a little crazy. I had to go home. One of my friends that I used to work with at Joe's Crab Shack was like, oh my God, come over, hang out with me. Just come over to the house, like I'll smoke you out. And I was like, I don't really like weed, but whatever, I'll go over there. So I go over there and I didn't realize that she meant smoke me out with a bowl of meth. And I was like, oh, awesome. So then that's when I really started smoking meth. I was living with my mom and I was turning 30 and like everything was just shitty. So I decided, you know what's going to fix me? Africa. I'm going to move to Africa. And I did a lot of meth and I Googled how to live with lions for 2 weeks straight and I figured it out. And moved to Africa. I don't know why. But it's always been a dream of mine. Like I would think about being with a big cat or like a baby tiger. And I would just I would cry just thinking about it. I would just cry. So I figured it out. I found this predator park in Africa and I wrote an essay and I got in. We only went to the mall once a week. So I knew that there was a liquor store in the mall. And I was like, okay, so I know I have a week. So I have to get like enough booze to last me a week. I would also make up excuses to go back to my cabin to drink. Like, oh, I wore the wrong type of shoes. Or, oh, my rain jacket, I don't have it and it's about to rain. But I was really just making up excuses to go back to my cabin to drink. And one day I overshot the mark. And after lunch, we always had human-animal interaction time, mandatory for 4 hours. So I had the babies one day. And the babies was a 3-month-old cheetah, a 4-month-old leopard, and a 5-month-old puma. And they were huge still. They were still like 100, 200 pounds, even though they were only 3-4 months. I drank a shitload of vodka before human-animal interaction time. And I laid down in the enclosure. And I was like waiting for the animals to come to me in the dirt. And I passed out. I fucking passed out. And I woke up. I woke up and it was cold. I woke up because I was cold and I was like, what the fuck? And then I realized there were like bugs on me and I was like, what the fuck? And I looked up and I'm like, where the fuck am I? And I see the gate, like the fence. And they had dragged me out of the enclosure because I was like lifeless, passed out, done. And the animals know when there's a lifeless body, right? So the animals were like pacing and like circling around me. And they had to drag me out of the enclosure. And then they just left me there. So I can hear all of the people that I worked with in Africa, like in the dining hall, like eating dinner. And I'm like, I'm not going in there. I was so mortified. And so I just went back to my cabin and just drank. I think I drank for like a day or two. And then I finally came out of my cabin and they were like, okay, so if you ever drink again, like when you're supposed to be working, you're going home. You're done. Any questions? And I was like, no. And then I talked to the guy that was in charge of the reptiles, and he was really cool. He was covered in tattoos. And he was asking me a lot of questions. I think he was in recovery. I was like, I think I have a problem. And he was like, I think you do. And I was like, damn. He's like, what? And I was like, wherever you go, there you are. And he's like, yeah. Like, I didn't realize that I was trying to run away when I moved to Africa. Duh. I thought Africa would fix me. Because you can't do drugs and drink in Africa. When it was time to stop, I was at checkmate. Everything was working for me until it didn't. And it was very fast. I was managing a full-time job, full-time relationship, I had roommates, had pets. I was managing it all very well. I was, as many people have said since I've recovered, the most functional alcoholic they have ever seen. Thank you, meth. But in a 2-week period of time, I got fired from the studio for being abrasive and combative with my manager. I lost the man that I was in love with because he caught me smoking meth in the closet. And I totaled my car at the airport. So a lot of people say they have downward spirals. I like to think my whole life was kind of a downward spiral. And that last 2 weeks was my downward flush. It just all went. And I had nothing left. And I had no more moves. A former coworker of mine from the dance studio, He worked there for a small amount of time, and I knew he had a weird story because he had New York license plate. He seemed a little rough, and he seemed a little twitchy at times. And so then he called me, and he was like, hey, I'm moving to Arizona tomorrow, but my roommate's kicking me out right now. Can I stay on you and blah, blah, blah's couch? And I was like, oh, well, he's gone, but I'll be upstairs crying. I'll unlock the door. Make yourself at home. So I go downstairs and I gather all the beer that I can, that I think I need, and I go upstairs, texting everybody in the world, telling them that my life is over. I think I was sending out suicide texts. I'm not really sure. I was a mess. Morning time comes, and I ran out of beer, and so it's like 8 a.m, and I'm sneaking down the stairs to get more beer. And so I like open the fridge and I like get out as much as I can. I had like a hoodie or something, a big shirt, and I'm like holding all this beer, and I start creeping out of the kitchen, and he like stirs, and I'm like, fuck. And he's like, hey. And I'm like, hi. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, it doesn't matter. Go back to bed. He's like, no, I gotta get up. What are you doing today? And I'm like, no plans. Why? And he's like, I've been going to this meeting, and I was gonna actually just drive to Arizona last night because I'm moving to Arizona, but I really wanted to go to this meeting one more time. Do you want to go? And I'm standing there with a ton of beer. It's like 8 a.m. I'm drunk, and I'm like, you think I need a meeting? It was so ridiculous. And he's like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, and I look at him, and I look at this, and I look at him, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go. And I cried the whole meeting. And I don't mean like I was like, I mean, I was like, like the whole meeting. It was so bad. And at the end, this guy, he like leans over and looks at me, and he goes, you look like you need to share something. Do you want to share something? And I was like, what? I know I said I was really scared. I think that's all I said. I said I was so scared. I was so scared. I had no idea what was happening. My life was falling apart, and I'm so scared. I said exactly what like a newcomer should say, because everybody flocked to me at the end of the meeting. Like all the women, one of them grabbed my phone and started putting her number in my phone. It made its way around this giant circle. I'm standing there going, what's happening? They're like, what are you doing tonight? Do you want to go to a meeting? What are you doing right now? Do you want to go to coffee? What are you doing right now? And I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. You know, it was so amazing. But I was really resistant. Even though I knew I needed it so bad, I was so resistant. And I was like, actually, I'm going to LA. I packed my car with bikinis and high heels, because that's what you do. And I kept drinking, and I totaled my car at the airport. We got to LA, and I drank another bottle of wine. And I woke up the next day, and I started going to meetings all day, every day, so I wouldn't drink, because I knew if I went home, I would drink more. So I'd go there at 9 a.m, I'd stay till 9 p.m, and then I would drink, because that's all I knew what to do. And by that point, I was so shaky. So I spent a month going to meetings in LA, listening to what they had to say, and drinking. Not really getting it. I just didn't want to be like these people. You know, a lot of these people were older, they didn't have teeth, like they look like alcoholics. And I was just like, I don't know. Maybe I'll be a part of this one day, but maybe not now. I couldn't tell yet. It was also really scary to think of not drinking anymore. When drinking is my solution to everything in life, and like not really knowing what the other solution was, not drinking sounds awful. So at the beginning, the meetings really just gave me something to identify with. You know, if somebody talked about the way they felt when they don't drink, or the way they feel when they do drink, or the way they feel at all times, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. That's me. That guy's telling how I feel. And then he tells me that he does this thing and he hasn't had a drink in 7 years. I can be like, holy fuck. Like, maybe it'll work for me. Maybe. Just maybe. You know? And that's really all that you need, is like that little seed planted. That's really all I needed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do anything without drinking. I had to learn how to take a shower. I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to drive. I don't miss drinking because I drank every day, all day. I would wake up and start drinking, and I would drink all day. And it was exhausting trying to figure it out. How am I going to, I have to wake up at this time to have this many drinks before I go to work. And I have to make sure that I get out of work for my dinner break so I can go home and have this many drinks. And if for some reason I have to stay, I have to get out of work at least so I can go to the liquor store to get a couple airplane bottles so I can at least stop the shaking at work. And then when I get out of work, I got to make sure I go straight home so I can, pick up a 30 pack before the CVS closes because the CVS sells it cheaper than Albertsons. And then it was exhausting. I don't miss it. Sometimes I wish I could get hammered just for fun, but it wouldn't be just for fun. It wouldn't be fun. Like, drinking without the consequences, for me, I don't know what that's like. It's not difficult to be around people that drink. It's difficult to be around my mom because she's my mom. And it's difficult to be around my mom when she's drinking and trying to hide it because she thinks it's disrespectful, which it's not. Like, if you were drinking beer, I wouldn't care. Like, I'm a server. I serve drinks all the time. There comes a point in your recovery where the obsession to drink is removed. Like, I don't think about it anymore. I don't see alcohol as medicine anymore because I'm not that sick anymore. But when I'm really sick, alcohol to me is medicine and it's going to fix my problem. That's the best way I can really put it. So I'm doing well right now. I'm treating my alcoholism. So alcohol doesn't look like something that's going to make me feel better anymore. So I don't really care. I live in Vegas, for fuck's sake. I'd be fucked. But my mom is trying to hide the alcohol from me out of respect. She doesn't really understand that part. My sobriety has definitely put a bit of strain on our relationship.
Do you think she needs a recovery program?
Only my mom can say she's an alcoholic. But she is.
Can we talk about David?
Let's talk about David. How do I start? How do I even begin? Where do I even begin with David? David was just a jackass. Such a jackass. Such a pain in the ass. Just, annoying and loud. And he always made fun of me. And he always said shit about me. And we always would end up in screaming fights by the end of the night. Because I was the only one that drove. So I'd drive all these fucking punk rock kids all around San Diego. And we'd end up in a fight. And then I'd take them home. And we just pestered each other. David went to college in New York City. And I was planning to go to New York college the next year. We developed a really cool relationship online. And it got to the point where we would talk every day. And we would talk about how exciting it would be for me to go out there and live there too, and blah, 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 blah. We ended up at Rockefeller Center watching the ice skaters. And we were watching them, and he was standing behind me, and he kissed me right here. And then I turned and I looked at him, and then he kissed me right here. And then we just started making out. And we were making out for hours. We were making out in the subway station. The cop actually came up to us and was like, "Stop it. Like, get off each other, you kids. You guys are crazy." And we were laughing so hard. It was like movie love. David and I had movie love. We hated each other in high school, and then we kissed in New York City, and then we had this beautiful, awesome relationship. He would sneak me into his dorm all the time, and because I'm so little, he had a roommate. He had a roommate in his dorm who didn't walk very well. He had crutches, and he also had a shopping cart. And so every time he went to class or he went to do his laundry, he had a shopping cart, and he would lean on the shopping cart to walk. And he would put his laundry and stuff in it. And so they would always sneak me in his shopping cart. And then I couldn't leave the dorm for the whole weekend. I would have to stay. And David had a fake ID, so he would go get these jugs of Carlo Rossi pink wine. Pink wine. David and I would go to costume parties all the time at Mindy's house. We were on our way there, and we were late. We didn't have costumes. And I was like, what the fuck are we going to do? And we went to CVS, and we bought those mini candy canes and duct tape. And then we went to one of those where they sell the Christmas trees on the street there in New York. And we just picked up all the dead leaves of Christmas trees, and we just duct taped candy canes and Christmas tree branches to us. And like I remember I was wearing a red bandana and I put like 2 candy canes and 2 branches on the side of me. He was home. He was home for summer. It was his summer break, and I stayed. At this point, I had been graduated from AMDA for almost a year. It was August of 2005. And he was like 4 days away from coming home. Usually he would always, like, when he came home, he would always just like message me, home, go to bed. And he never did. And I woke up the next day and he didn't. And I was like, hello? No response. I knew something was going on because I didn't call him. Like, I didn't call the house. It was weird. It was so weird because, like, he didn't see my messages and I didn't want to call the house. I just had this fucking feeling. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to wait. I'm being crazy. I'm just going to wait for him to call me so I can just go, whew, okay, everything's good. And he didn't call me. And it was like 6 o'clock at night, New York time. And I was like, fuck it, I have to do this. And I called the house and his mom answered. And I was like, hi, like I always am. And she was like, hi, Nikki, hang on. I remember I was pacing and I was like, something's happening. And then his dad got on the phone and he was like, Nikki, are you sitting down? And I was like, no. And he's like, I think you should sit down. And I was like, okay. And I kept pacing. And I remember I was in my apartment in Astoria. And I was walking like this, like how I am right now, in our like kitchen / living room. And I jumped up on we had a futon. And I jumped up on it, even though he told me to sit down. And I was like, okay. So instead, as I jumped up on the futon and I was like, uh-huh. And he said, David was killed last night. And I just like didn't hear anything else. My life just shattered. I started like no, like, you know, like feeling like everything's being taken, like everything is just being pulled out from under me. And I started like freaking out and running and no. And I didn't hear what he was saying. I didn't hear it. And it just felt like that. And I finally ran into my room. I was standing on my bed. I was standing on everything for some reason. I don't know what that was about. It was like control. I needed to control something by standing on it. I needed to be big because I felt so small, maybe. And I remember his mom got on the phone and she was like, Nikki. And I was like, why is this happening? She told me not to do anything. Not to do anything bad. I called Tara, my roommate. She was working and I got a manager on the phone and I was like, you need to send Tara home right now. And she's like, why? And I said, I don't want to say it. And she said, why, Nikki? And I said, I don't want to say it. And she said, tell me. And I said, David died. And I said it and I said it out loud and it was real. Tara got on the phone real fast and Tara was like, I'm coming home. Don't do anything. Everybody thought I was going to kill myself. And Betsy, I think, beat Tara to my house. I think Betsy got there first. And she asked me what I wanted. If I wanted a beer, if I wanted a drink. And I was like, no, I wanted nothing to do with alcohol. Because I found out that he was killed in a drunk driving accident. I wanted a cigarette. I had never had a cigarette. My goal in life was to never, ever smoke a cigarette till the day I died. And Betsy was like, what? I was like, I want a cigarette. And she was like, why? And I was like, because it's the only thing that I know in this world that won't remind me of David. Because everything else in the world I had done with him. We had done together. So I smoked a cigarette. It was gross. When I moved back home with my mom, after that, my childhood bedroom, I would sit online and talk to my friends and drink and drink and drink. And every night I would pass out and the TV would still be on and the lights would still be on. And And I would open my eyes and think, fuck. Here we go again. I processed it the way I could. Over is such a weird word. It kind of makes you feel like when you're over a relationship, it's like, you know, you like kick it off your shoes, you know, like you're like done with it. And I don't think you can ever be done with something like that. I've processed it. I feel like I've healed from it. I feel like maybe there's a wound that I like to scratch open every now and then, sure, but is it something that plagues me every day? No. No. I feel like my shine dulled after that. And I don't want to say I drank because of David. I drank because I'm an alcoholic, but drinking is my solution to life's problems. So when that problem arose, I would say that my drinking became a lot more prominent in my life as a solution, if that makes any sense. David's death has made me scared of every relationship just disappearing again, like he did. Remember when I didn't go on all those auditions because I wanted to stay in New York with my boyfriend? It made me regret a lot of things. Ironically, it didn't make me never drink and drive. Success used to mean a lot of different things for me. And now I just... So, okay, there's this like little prayer I say every day when I get up. And I basically just say I ask the universe to let the world be a slightly better place when I go to bed because I was in it. You know, basically I just want the world to be a slightly brighter, slightly happier, slightly more lovely of a place because of something I did. And that to me is good. You know, it doesn't mean being rich and famous and, you know, married or not married or, you know, with a big house or whatever. You know, I just want to be able to lay my head on the pillow at night and know I did the best I could that day. Failure to me is like choosing not to do something when you know you could have. More of like a state of giving up. Yeah, I think failure is more of a... I don't like that word. I hope that people get out of watching this a sense of self, some inspiration. I hope people can laugh. I hope people can appreciate the rawness of this. And if you don't, you can go fuck yourselves. I don't know.
And on that note, thank you. Have a good night.